Do you shoot RAW with your digital cameras? If you don't, you should. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about why. I'm going to show you some examples, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to get more out of that RAW file, whether it's from a vintage camera like my M9 or from a modern digital camera. So I just purchased this M9 with the Summicron 35 lens. This is the exact same camera setup that I had back between 2011 and 2015. I'm having a total love fest with it right now. I'm loving the handling, I'm loving the feeling, and I'm really loving the look of what the RAW files are bringing me. To the extent that when I loaded my first test files into Photoshop, I was like, wow, these are more beautiful than what I remembered. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it. Over a decade of improvements in technology and color science have happened. Photoshop in 2025 is much more refined, much more nuanced than Photoshop of 2011 and 2012. And that got me thinking. I said, let me pull out some of my older finished images and take a look at them compared to these test files. And same thing bore out. The new files looked better. The new files were smoother. And the great part, though, about having shot RAW all those years ago is that I can go back and redo those files in 2025 and take advantage of all of the really cool new technology and really cool new color science that's available and not be stuck. Whereas if you work in JPEG, you're really limited. So this is why I always say, always shoot a RAW. Treat it like a digital negative, stick it away. Someday you may want to come back to it, and you're going to be thankful that you have all of that total raw sensor data to be able to work with. So then I said, what if I go back and pull out an image from this book project that I'm working on? This is What Gets Lost, Images from Route 20, America's Longest Road. And all these images in this book were made with this particular setup. This particular cover image was made in Nebraska. And I said, what if I pull the TIFF up? What if I pull up my finished image and I print this 20 by 30 inches on my Canon printer on like Canson Baryta Photographic 2. Great combination. And I did, and it looked beautiful. But then I said, what if I take the actual RAW file from all those years ago and reopen it, but now in Photoshop 2025, and remake the file using my new Photoshop workflow, which is a little bit more going on in Photoshop RAW because there's a lot more you can do in RAW now. And I'm blown away once again by the results. So I made a print of it at 20 by 30 inches. And in just a second, we're going to look at them side by side. But this is really the power of working with RAW because you can reimagine that image later as technology improves. So now let's take a look at the prints. So here are our two files, very beautiful. Let's start with this one here. This is the version from 2012. And as you can see, the color and everything is really beautiful. You know, the resolution is quite good. This was shot at ISO 500 at f1.7 at a 60th of a second. You know, everything looks really great. I do see some CA and stuff like that here in the handle, but for the most part, everything is well done and what I would have expected I would make back during that time period. But when I move to this image, this is the new version. It's so much better. The color is so much better. The reds, the color in the heater here. You notice there's no CA here now. I just hope you really can see how much better this new version looks than the previous version. You know, I think that the color science, you know, what they've added to Photoshop really makes it an exciting time for those of us with older RAW files to be able to reimagine them in a new way. Super test image that I just shot outside my studio door. It just hid the field, it's really pretty light. And I thought I would show you what I do to an image like this when I'm trying to tweak it. And these are some things that I think just give you, you know, so much more out of these RAW files. So over here under light, one of the biggest things that I'm always making sure is that I'm not clipping any of the highlights up here. So I look at my overall exposure, look at the overall histogram, and decide, you know, what kind of density I want. That looks about right there. Under highlights, I want to make sure that nothing's clipping, so you don't see anything like that happening on the screen. I pull it just to the point where nothing like that's breaking. I also can go to the whites, those little red dots down here that were happening. I can pull them back just a little tiny bit that way. I check the blacks, and I'm using this on a Mac by pressing the Option key, and the slider, it allows me to see, here's no blacks, here's a whole bunch of blacks. And what I'm looking for here is just a trace of a few dots of black starting to form. Something about like that. So that's my overall light adjustments. The next thing that I love to do is I go down to optics, and because I'm working with a non 6-bit coded lens, all I have to do is hit, remove chromatic aberrations. But because I set up a user profile, the lens information has been recorded with the raw file. So it pulls up that I'm using a Leica M and a Summicron. And yet, if you don't have this type of setup, you can just scroll through here and look at the just bazillion number of different cameras and lens combinations that are supported. I find it usually is about what I'm looking for. The next thing that I like to work on is detail. And this is my super huge tip for the day. The new feature here called super resolution. This is absolutely amazing. So what it's doing is it's using AI interpolation software to interpolate your file to twice the width and twice the height. So on my Leica file here, that would normally be around 139 megabyte, 16-bit file, it'll be about 413 megabytes. And because we're doing this interpolation here, as opposed to in Photoshop, we have a lot more data to work with. And I find the results are absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So I always click on super resolution, and it'll usually take a second or two. That was actually pretty quick. Normally it'll take a second or two in order to see the full effects. But look at the micro detail that we're getting here in this tree. It's incredible. One thing that I'm really intrigued by, and I'm experimenting more myself, if you click on these two filters right here, it gives you the ability of all these different presets that are built into Photoshop. And this allows you to adjust like the color and the contrast of an image here. And I know there are companies that are making emulation softwares that go in this part of the program as opposed to filters in Photoshop. You ideally would like to get a basic color setup from here and not from working in Photoshop, mainly because you just got so much more information to work with here than you do once you've brought the image into Photoshop. So the more you can do in RAW, getting the basic overall color, getting the basic overall contrast, and once again, hitting that super resolution. Now, if you're working with a camera that's like a 50 megapixel, just be aware that if you hit super resolution, you're going to end up with a file that's over a gigabyte in size. It's massive. So decide if you need this. Here's someone working with like a Ricoh GRD4 CCD, the camera that I just posted a whole bunch of videos on, or an S9 IV by Sony, any of those cameras. Super resolution absolutely is your best friend to get really amazing, clean, smooth, larger files from those older cameras. So now if we hit open, dun, 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 dun. Okay, here's our file, and we can see that down here, it is a 413.7 megabyte file. It's massive. It's a 20 by 30 inch image. And as I zoom in to this branch, look at the clarity. That's only 66%. That's 100% right there. This is from an 18 megapixel camera from 2009 when it first came out. And that is spectacular. The noise, everything, this was shot obviously at base ISO 160. So at this point, I've got the resolution, I've got the contrast, I've got the color, nothing's clipped anywhere. And at this point, I'm going to use Photoshop for what I think Photoshop does really well, which is dodge, burn, increase color a little bit here and there, and then set the file to print. So I thought I would show you the two digital files side by side in case you really couldn't see as much of a difference as I hope you could with the prints. So here is the old version, and it looks really good. I mean, I'm really happy with it. But if I zoom into those pots, take a look at the CA, take a look at how the metal has this harsh feel. And then if we look immediately at the new version, first off, just look at the color. I mean, the color is to die for. But if we zoom into the pots, look at how the CA is gone or almost gone. And look at how much smoother that subtlety is in the metal. Let's take a look at those two details side by side right now. And this is what I'm talking about. The color science in 2025 is just so much more evolved and advanced. So if you have an older digital camera and you were smart enough to shoot RAW files, 2025, you can do so much more with those files. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now go shoot some film and maybe a digital picture or two. Hello, 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 hello. Do you shoot RAW when working with your digital camera? If you don't, fuck you.